I will give you a hint that the answers are on the slides. Does that help? I would really prefer you, I know you gotta record it for
LT and
but I
Sam.
would really prefer you not taking pictures on the slide. Okay?
Oh,
Thanks!
man.
Whiz.
Did you wrestle Vicente?
No. I talked to you earlier.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I don't, you still have to study, so if you feel the need to take the picture, go ahead. You still gotta study. Alright, so let's start out with COPD, which stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Alright? So remember, as the slide says, it's basically something that's chronic that's going on in the respiratory system. Really specifically, the distal part of the respiratory tree. We talk about the respiratory tree, remember the mouth and the nose at the beginning of it goes to the pharynx, which again connects to the larynx. The larynx is the beginning of multiple anatomy positions in the larynx. Your thyroid cartilage, your glottic opening, your epiglottis. All that connect to your trachea, goes down to your trachea, down to your carina, which splits into the left and right bronchi, which gets smaller into bronchioles, which eventually meets up with the alveoli. So the bronchioles and the alveoli is where the problem is at with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, okay? Usually two things, if not multiple things, are going on in those areas, okay? One, the lining of the bronchioles are inflamed, which is going to cause swelling. And along with that swelling, you're going to get mucus production. That's going to seep in. So the swelling and the mucus production is going to do what to the diameter of the vessel, or the bronchioles? It's minimizing the airflow, right? There's hardly any airflow going through there, okay? Now, because there's a reduction in airflow, airflow going into the alveoli is reduced, so that means oxygen is going to be lessened. If oxygen's being lessened, CO2 is going to what?
Rise.
Okay? Now, air that gets in there is going to hopefully get used by the body, but remember the body is all about bringing that waste out, that CO2, right? In the alveoli. But guess what? Just like the oxygen can't get in, guess what's not going to be able to get out?
CO2.
CO2. That's also elevating, right? Okay. Now, that air that can't get out of the alveoli, what do you think is going to eventually happen to the alveoli if it keeps collecting air? It's not going to pop, okay? But it's going to keep getting inflated, right? To the point to where to the point to where it's going to what we call hyperinflation. Kind of like imagine you inflate a balloon, okay? Over a long period of time, that balloon starts to deteriorate, right? Same things happen to the alveoli. Those alveoli get stretched out so far to the walls, get to the point where they're ineffective, meaning they usually begin to harden. And if they harden, will there be exchange of O2 and CO2?
Nope.
Nope. So that means CO2 buildup continues to grow in the body. And that's the problem with COPD, okay? How is it going to present? Now again, with COPD, we're talking about a generic, or actually a general term. There are two specific types, two forms of COPD, which is your chronic bronchitis. That's usually the one that involves swelling and mucus production, okay? Emphysema is the other one. That's the one that usually pertains to swelling of the bronchioles, but more specifically with the alveoli sacs. They're hyperinflated, and since they're hyperinflated, the alveoli sac actually hardens. And that's the problem with emphysema. Another way to look at it, and hopefully it sounds like this, if I say which one is the wet one, which one would you choose? Yep. Which one's the dry one?
Emphysema.
Okay, see how that works? So that's also what's kind of going, lets you know which one is dealing with mucus production. Now, this is how it presents. All right? Difficulty breathing, cough, mucus production, which is sputum production, okay? Rhonchi, why do we hear rhonchi sounds? Because of the mucus production, okay? Wheezing from bronchoconstriction. Remember I talked about the narrowing, okay? Decrease or absent breath sounds. Why? Blockage in the bronchioles. Again, swelling is going to reduce the diameter, right? Mucus production is also going to reduce the diameter. So that means airflow is gonna be minimized. So you see how we get diminished or absent breath sounds? So don't think of it as a pneumothorax or hemothorax, because that's when you think of diminished breath sounds or absent breath sounds, you usually immediately think, oh, pneumothorax, hemothorax, right? No, you gotta understand the pathophysiology of what's going on here. Why would COPD patients have decreased or absent breath sounds? It's most likely because those bronchioles have shut off or are all plugged up and we can't get airflow moving through there. See how that works? Any questions? Or do you guys need me to elaborate anything else that you see on here? So again, it's all about knowing what COPD is, the types, and specifically what's going on within those types, and how do they generally present. Does everybody understand this side over here?
Bronchi is where it sounds like rubber rubbing against itself, isn't it?
To me, it sounds more like a dry, I guess you could say a dry rubbing sound, but it's not like the squeaking sound.
Yeah.
It's like just a dry rub is what it sounds like. You guys need a refresher on what it sounds like?
Yes.
Let's see if I can pull up that.
Hey everyone, welcome to our
What's that sound like?
Steam.
Huh?
Like rubbing on a chalkboard or something. Like Darth Vader.
It's just your normal breath sounds. The reason why does it sound like it's more like you said Darth Vader, more deeper sounds?
Mm-hmm.
It's because this is the sounds that you're gonna hear more toward the bronchial, the bronchis, okay? Bigger tubes, right? Bigger tubes mean more air pathway, so a louder sound, all right? Anything? What does that sound like? It can be associated with a fluid.
Bronchi?
Rails.
It's not bronchi, it's rails.
Rails?
Okay, let's do it again. You hear because rails are usually crackling, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You kind of hear that? Bubbling sound? Okay. How about this one?
Wheezing.
Yep, wheezing.
Sounds like rails too.
Does it sound like a clear crackle though? Clear bubbling? Does it sound clear like
Hmm.
blowing into like thin fluid
No, sounds real.
or thicker, right?
Ronca.
Okay. Because mucus production here. Okay? So that air is going through that thick mucus. So it's a little bit more kind of thicker type of bubbling versus a more clear type of bubbling. Alright? What do you think? What does it sound like?
Sounds like rails.
Crackles, there you go. Crackles, and crackles means what? Rails, right?
Rails.
Okay. So with crackles, between the difference between crackles and ronchi, what's the difference between the two? Because they both sound like a bubbling, right?
Rails is in the alveoli, and Ronca is in the tubes.
Yes, that's one way of looking at it, okay? But again, the sound. What kind of fluid is usually going to be associated with crackles or rails?
Thin fluid.
There you go, like blood, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, when that blood is going into the alveoli, it's basically just the blood volume that's going into the cells. All the cells in the blood, they have a hard time passing through that membrane. So it's basically all the liquid stuff of the blood. It's not the solid stuff of the blood. So it's thin, right? In fact, if those blood vessels try to push up against the alveoli, that pressure can be so much where it can cause the cells to crack, to break into pieces, and then that's how it makes its way into the alveoli. Okay, but the whole cell itself, it can't make its way across that alveolar membrane. So the fluid, think of it as being strained out. Okay, like spaghetti, you got it in the pot. When you put it in the strainer, all that clear fluid goes through, right? The spaghetti can't make it through it. It's kind of what's going on. It's all that clear fluid, okay? Whereas ronchi, it sounded a little bit more thick, right? Because mucus is thicker. It's got a more muddy sound. So the difference would be blowing air into a cup of water versus blowing air into a cup of mud.